At 24, I confessed something intimate at a Mafia party, never imagining that Rocco Sorrentino was hearing every word. He was my brother's best friend, the most dangerous and forbidden man in the city. But when someone tried to turn my embarrassment into humiliation, Rocco made everyone understand one thing: no one would touch my name. The problem is that, by protecting me, he crossed a line he never should have crossed, and awoke in me a love capable of destroying us both. Hi, I'm Lena. A special shout out to those of you watching Book 1 for free here on the My Stories platform, completely ad-free and uninterrupted. Chapter 1: The Confession on the Balcony. The dress was too red. I stared at the bedroom mirror for the 4th time that night, and tried to convince myself the color wasn't a cry for help. Mira had picked it. Mira always picked. I just wore whatever she threw on my bed and tried to survive the biting January cold outside. "You've been standing there for 10 minutes staring at your own collarbone," she said from the doorway, heel in one hand, glass of Prosecco in the other. "Allegra, it's a party, not a papal audience. A party at the Sorrentino penthouse. It's not the same thing. It's exactly the same thing, with better hors d'oeuvres." I grabbed the black purse off the dresser and turned around. Mira had a smile that was designed to push every shy person out of the house, and it had been pushing me since I was 12, even before she became a fashion designer for the small brand that was starting to make noise in Philadelphia. It was an irritating superpower. I'd been her favorite victim for over a decade, and she knew it with a barely concealed satisfaction. She pulled me by the arm down the stairs. "It's going to be a quiet night," she swore, knowing perfectly well she was lying. "You drink 2 glasses, I drink 6. We leave before midnight. Promise." "Mira, the last time you said promise." I woke up 2 days later with hair dye on my pillow. That was an artistic phase. Her car cut through the city in a rare silence. Philadelphia in January looked like a city that had forgotten how to breathe, white smoke rising from the sewers, storefronts lit too bright, heavy coats moving fast through the intersections. The car heater hummed too low to actually warm anything, and I sat curled up in the seat with my purse pressed against my lap, watching the skyscrapers slide past the window as if I needed to memorize the escape route. The asphalt glistened with salt and damp. I tried not to think about who would be up there. I didn't think. I thought the whole time. The Sorrentino penthouse took up the entire top floor of a restored old building in Rittenhouse Square. 30 floors of silent elevator, floor-to-ceiling mirror, the smell of leather and something woody I could never quite identify. Sandalwood, maybe, or cedar, mixed with the expensive cologne of people who used that space, like it was a natural extension of their own bodies. Mira touched up her lipstick in the elevator mirror. I looked at the tips of my shoes and counted the floors. "Allegra, what? Stop making that face like you're about to be executed." "I'm not making any face. You're making the face you make when Gianni keeps you out of a room." The elevator stopped. The doors opened, and the penthouse came at me like a contained wave. Music low and precise, the kind that fills a room without ever imposing. Voices that knew exactly how loud not to interfere with serious conversation. Floor-to-ceiling glass showing the city below covered in fine, luminous snow. Around 40 people scattered through the space with the ease of those who'd always known where to position themselves. Dark metal chandeliers hung from the ceiling in a row, pouring amber light over marble tables and tapestries that cost more than my apartment. Every one of those people belonged in that place more than I ever would. My brother came toward me before I'd taken 3 steps. Johnny Viscari, 32. Shoulders too broad for the suit he insisted on wearing a size too small. The smile of a man who ran half the family's business and still managed to look like the boy I'd followed all over the house in childhood. He kissed my forehead before he spoke. His hand stayed on my face a second longer than necessary, his way of saying he was relieved without needing the words. "You came. You threatened to cut off my apartment's internet. I threatened for your own good." He looked at Mira. "Evening, Costa." "Vescari," Mira replied, with that smile she reserved just for him, and that he pretended not to see. "Where's your handsome partner?" I felt the blood rise before the name was even spoken. "Working," Johnny answered. "Short. I mean, on the balcony, pretending to work." Mira nudged me in the back. "Wah, what a shame." Gianni put his hand on my shoulder. The weight of his hand was as familiar as the ceiling of my parents' house. I'd grown up under that weight. I'd learned to breathe beneath it, and at certain moments I wondered if he knew that. If he knew I'd never learned to breathe on my own because it had never been necessary. "Allegra, stay close to me or Mira." His voice dropped. "We've got new people circulating tonight. Don't know them. Don't trust them. I'm 24 years old, Johnny. I know. That's why I'm asking, not telling. He left before I could answer. Mira waited 3 seconds and pushed me toward the bar. The night has about 3 hours, she calculated. I'll give you 1 hour to stop staring at the balcony. I'm not staring at the balcony. Allegra, you're staring at the balcony. I didn't answer. I grabbed the first glass that appeared on the counter and drank half of it in one gulp. The wine was too good to be wasted like that, but I was performing a function, and the function was surviving the night. 2 other friends joined us at some point between the second and third glass. Beatrice, who worked with Mira and had the precise manner of someone who sizes everything up before laughing, and Carla, who was studying law and laughed at absolutely everything with an energy I envied and feared in equal measure. We sat in the farthest corner of the penthouse, on a set of low, dark leather armchairs that smelled of something expensive and old, near a wall that opened directly onto a balcony enclosed by a sliding glass panel. The glass was halfway retracted. Outside, it was still snowing. Small, slanting flakes that the wind scattered before letting them land. You could hear the silence of the city 30 floors below, muffled by the height and the glass, and the music still playing inside. The cold came through the open gap in subtle waves and settled on my bare arms, but I didn't move to close it. I tried not to look outside. I looked outside. His silhouette was there, broad back against the railing, glass in his right hand, the black suit blending into the night as if he'd been made from the same material. Rocco Sorrentino didn't wear an overcoat in the cold because he thought an overcoat softened his posture. It was the kind of detail I shouldn't have learned about him. There were several details I shouldn't have learned, and I learned them anyway, in silence, over years of family dinners and events like that one, where he always stood a little apart from everyone, and I always ended up looking at the wrong side of the room. I looked away in time, or thought I did. "All right," Mira announced, clinking her glass against mine. "Time for the question of the night." "No. Yes. Mira, I swear by everything that—" Allegra Vescari. Beatrice leaned forward with that smile she used in court and at the poker table. "We've gone 3 months without decent gossip. Do the charity." "I don't have gossip." "Why don't you have gossip?" Carla asked. "Because I don't have a life." "Lie," Mira said. "You've got a gallery opening. You've got your brother trying to approve every screw. You've got 5 different men wanting to take you to dinner every month. You just don't pick any of them." "I didn't say I don't pick. I said I don't have gossip." "Same thing." "It's not—" Allegra. Beatrice set her glass on the glass table with a calculated lightness. "When was the last time you kissed someone?" The question dropped into the circle like a stone into a shallow lake, the kind of question that has no safe answer, only the silence that precedes it. And the silence that came from me was too long to pass off as carelessness. Carla laughed before I did. Mira laughed after. I stayed quiet too long. "Oh my God," Mira whispered. "Oh my God, calm down. Oh my God, stop." "Saint Allegra," Carla began, and the phrase hung in the air like an old joke taken up again with renewed pleasure. "Saint Allegra Vescari, patron of—" "Don't finish that sentence. Patron of those who wait for the right man." I drank the rest of the glass in one gulp. I shouldn't have. It was already the 4th glass, and my body had never handled liquor. Never handled this kind of involuntary honesty that alcohol tends to collect with interest. But in that moment, with the balcony glass behind me, and the 3 of them laughing in front of me and the wind outside carrying snow at a diagonal, drinking seemed easier than thinking. "You're all unbearable," I said, faking the smile. "All of you." "Allegra." Mira took my hand across the table, her palm warm against my cold fingers. "Seriously, how long? How long what? What you know?" I looked at her. I looked at Beatrice. I looked at Carla. The 3 of them had that look women get with each other when they know they're about to steal a truth. The other was guarding without realizing she was guarding it. The background music went up half a tone because someone requested a different track. The room got half a second louder, the voices adjusted to the new volume, and it was in exactly that half second of noise that the wrong courage rose up my throat with the lingering taste of the wine. Fruity, dry, more honest than I meant to be. "I'm 24 years old," I said, with a laugh that wasn't mine, "and I'm still a virgin. Somebody call the press." The silence between the 3 of them lasted a blink. Then Mira burst out laughing. Beatrice covered her mouth with her fingers, eyes wide in an expression somewhere between shock and tenderness. Carla clapped once, without realizing it. "You're a legend," Mira declared. "I'm getting that tattooed." "You're not." "I am. On my arm." Mira, I swear to God. A toast. Beatrice raised her glass with genuine solemnity. To the only woman who knows how to wait in this city. A toast. Carla laughed. I raised the empty glass and faked the toast. The three of them clinked glass against glass. The sound was small and ridiculous, and for a second I thought the embarrassment had died right there, buried inside that little circle of 4 women in a corner of a penthouse, under that music, in that leather armchair that smelled of grown-up places, and that I still didn't know how to occupy naturally. I thought. I turned my head to laugh along, and the laugh stopped halfway out. On the other side of the sliding glass, with his whiskey glass half a centimeter from his lips, and his body very still, the specific stillness of someone who doesn't want to be noticed but already has been, Rocco Sorrentino was looking straight at me. He wasn't looking at Mira. He wasn't looking at the crowded room or at the snow falling behind him in slow, indifferent flakes. He was looking at me with the precision of someone who'd heard every syllable of the confession, every laugh that covered the embarrassment, and was, in that exact second, deciding in silence what to do with all of it. I felt the cold from my stomach sink down my legs. Mira was still laughing. Beatrice had already filled another glass. Carla was greeting someone across the room, and I couldn't look away from the man who, from the snowy balcony, returned my gaze without hurry, without shame, and with no intention of pretending he hadn't heard a thing. He lowered his glass, and he smiled, with just one corner of his mouth, slowly. Chapter 2. The Man Who Didn't Laugh. I woke with my face buried in the pillow, and the exact feeling of someone who'd lost something important during sleep. The light in my apartment was weak, the radiator hissing low in the corner, and the window glass milky with accumulated cold. I remembered the red of the dress before I remembered the rest. Then I remembered the rest. Then I pressed the pillow against my face and wished, with a childish sincerity, that the floor would swallow me before noon. The image of him through the glass came back in high resolution, the glass halfway to his lips, the half-turned smile, slow, in no hurry at all, the calm confirmation, without urgency, that he'd heard absolutely everything. I threw myself out of bed because lying still hurt more. The long shower didn't fix it. I stood under the hot water until it started to cool, as if the heat could dissolve the night before, and it didn't fix a thing. The black coffee didn't fix it. The light makeup I put on in front of the bathroom mirror didn't fix a thing. It just gave me a slightly less crumpled face for the embarrassment underneath, the kind of varnish that fooled no one looking up close. Mira arrived before 9 with 2 thermal cups and a face I knew very well. "Before you say anything," she began, coming right in, setting the cups on the kitchen counter with a precise thud. "I need you to sit down." "No, Allegra, sit." I sat. "Sal Lombardi," she said the name slowly, like releasing an insect onto a table. "Left the party last night spreading the word that you confessed to being a virgin at 24. To everyone. He's in Renata's coffee group, in the club group, texting with the Marchetti brothers. He's laughing." I looked at the coffee cup, and the coffee cup offered me no solution. The steam rose slowly, indifferent. "Sal Lombardi," I repeated. "Yes, the resentful short guy with the bloodshot eyes. That's the one. Who told him I existed?" "Allegra. He was at the party. He was 2 meters from us when you said it." I didn't remember Sal 2 meters away. I didn't remember Sal anywhere the night before, not with that detail, but Mira didn't have the face of someone making things up. "I'm going to disappear," I said, with a calm that surprised me. "I'll go to my parents' house. I'll wear black. I'll fake a mourning. I'll move to another country. You're not going to do any of that. I'm buying a ticket right now. You're going to drink this coffee." I drank the coffee. It didn't help, but it was hot, and warmth was something, at least. I hadn't finished the second half of the cup when someone knocked on the door. 3 short, even knocks, the kind that didn't ask permission. They announced. Mira looked at me. I looked at the door. The knocks came again, at the same exact rhythm, with no impatience and no hesitation. I knew who it was before I opened, or I knew where it came from. Luca Bianchi was taller than he looked from a distance. Dark coat, hands in his pockets, gaze as calm as the surface of a frozen lake. I'd always seen him on the edge of the room at Sorrentino events, always in silence, never close enough to exchange more than 2 sentences. "Miss Vescari?" He tilted his head just enough. "Mr. Sorrentino asked me to bring you to his office." "Asked," I repeated. "Asked. I go now? Whenever you're ready. I'll wait downstairs." He waited for the answer with the patience of someone who waited for a living, as if time were a subject that didn't affect him. Behind me, Mira made a face that served for 3 pages of commentary without needing a single word. 5 minutes, I said. Take your time. He went down. I closed the door. I leaned my back against the wood and felt the cold of the surface through the overcoat I hadn't yet put on. Don't go, Mira whispered. I'm going. Allegra, Mira, I'm not going for the reason you're thinking. I'm going because, if I don't, I'll spend the rest of the week imagining what he wanted, and I can't stand imagining anything else today. I already hit my imagination limit at 7 in the morning. She looked at me for a while, studying my face with the care of someone searching for a crack in glass. Then she squeezed my hand and left, saying she'd keep her phone in her hand. I put on the gray overcoat. I pinned my hair up in a quick twist. Without a mirror, I left. Luca's car was a black sedan that smelled of new leather, and a heater that had been running a while. He drove without turning on the radio, without trying to make conversation, without looking in the rearview mirror more than once. I pressed my purse against my lap and looked out the window as if snow-covered Philadelphia had some new answer tucked away in a building I hadn't yet noticed. It didn't. Rocco's Casino was on the waterfront, with a discreet facade, no name in big letters, no neon sign, just 2 double doors of dark wood, and a pair of discreet cameras above the frame. Luca brought me in through the back, down a service corridor with light too soft and a beige carpet that muffled the sound of footsteps until the silence grew thick. We went up a flight of wooden stairs. He opened a door at the end without knocking. Here, he said. Oh, I'll stay outside. The office was exactly what I expected and nothing I expected. Dark wood walls, shelving to the ceiling full of books with no visible titles on the spines. A single old painting framed above the cold fireplace. A female figure. Sepia palette. Lines fine as silk thread. A wide desk with no papers in sight. Just a glass of water and a cup of coffee still steaming. The smell of fresh coffee and something woody that I finally, after years of parties at the Sorrentinos, identified clearly. Cedar. He was standing behind the desk. No suit jacket. White shirt. Sleeves rolled to the elbow. The complete absence of the blazer I'd seen the night before. The matte gold ring on the middle finger of his right hand. Dark hair arranged with the precision of a man who didn't care about looking arranged. He looked at me when I came in like someone greeting a difficult decision. Without surprise. Without a smile. With that total attention he had, the attention of someone who misses nothing. Sit, he said, his voice lower than I remembered from the night before. I'd rather stand. Sit, Allegra. I sat. I hated having sat. I hated even more the fact that I sat because he asked, and not because I wanted to, and that this difference hadn't seemed so important until the second it happened. He came around the desk, rested his hand on the back of the chair facing mine without sitting, and looked at me with that look he had, the look of someone finishing calculations in silence and filing away the result. Acosta already told you about Lombardi. She did. You've probably also heard that he lost his invitation to Renata's, to the gentlemen's club, and to the Marchetti table. I hadn't heard that. I swallowed the reflex to show surprise, held my chin firm. I have. Good, he said. Then this conversation will be short. No, it won't. He raised an eyebrow. It was the closest thing to surprise I'd ever seen on his face, and it lasted less than a second. No. I gripped the purse in my lap and forced myself to look up, straight into his eyes. I didn't ask for a savior, Mr. Sorrentino. I didn't ask for an avenger. I didn't ask for any man acting behind my name's back while I slept. I didn't act behind your name's back. You acted without consulting me. Consulting takes time. His voice stayed low, stayed controlled, but something in his eyes stopped calculating and started observing, in a different way, more slowly. In a few hours, the joke would have become fact for half the city. In a week, an indisputable fact. In a month, a new surname in your social bio. I know how to handle a joke. You shouldn't have had to handle this one. Who decides that? I do. The word fell like a stone on glass. No variation in volume, no effort. With the frightening naturalness of someone who had always known it was true, I stood. My legs trembled a millimeter and I forced myself to keep my face smooth, my posture straight, my shoulders still. You don't decide anything about me. My voice came out firmer than I expected. You're my brother's friend. You're not my father. You're not my husband. You're not my owner. And you're not going to keep acting all over the city like you are, just because you heard one sentence I shouldn't have said on a balcony I didn't even know had people on it. He looked at me in silence for one long second, the kind of silence he used as an instrument. And I wasn't trying to possess you, Vescari. Are you sure? I'm sure. Then what were you trying to do? He came around the chair, not to sit, to stand in front of me, one step closer than he should have, close enough that I could feel the heat of his body and the cedar in the folds of the white shirt, close enough that I had to lift my chin to look into his eyes without backing away. I was trying to keep a small man from hurting you over a choice that doesn't diminish your worth. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. He went on, and his voice dropped another half-tone, became almost nothing but texture in the warm air of the office. You don't have to apologize for anything, VlRGlN. For nothing you said, for nothing you didn't do, for nothing you'll still choose to do. If it's ever a day, it'll be however you decide. Not in the joke of a man who drank too much at a party that didn't deserve your presence. The air in the office became something else. It got denser, more closed in, as if the dark wood walls had moved 2 centimeters closer without my noticing. I didn't know if it was the sentence or the voice, or the way he looked at my mouth for half a second before returning to my eyes, with that clinical precision that was more unsettling than anything obvious. I know I gripped the purse hard enough to mark my palm. I know I thought, with a cold clarity that didn't match the heat of the room, that I needed to leave that office before I thought anything else. I'm leaving, I said. You are, and don't send for me again. I know. I came to tell you to stop. He tilted his head a millimeter. He didn't answer. I walked to the door. I put my hand on the knob, the metal cold against my palm. And because something in me still hadn't learned absolutely anything, I turned my face back. The next time you hear something about me, I said, pretend you didn't hear it. He was in the same place, motionless, white shirt, hands at his sides, gaze fixed on me with a constancy that weighed. I can't, VlRGlN. I left. Luca was waiting in the corridor exactly as he'd promised, leaning against the wall with the same posture as before, as if no time had passed. He asked no questions. He took me to the car without hurry. He took me to my building. He opened the passenger door with the same silent ceremony as when he'd picked me up, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I climbed the stairs to my apartment with heavy feet and his sentence hammering behind my eyes, repeating at the exact rhythm of the steps. You don't have to apologize for anything, VlRGlN. I locked the door. I leaned my forehead against the cold wood. I pressed the coat against my chest with both hands, as if I needed to keep something in place. And for the first time in my life I felt, with a frightening clarity that didn't even give me time to pretend it wasn't true, the scent of the danger of wanting. Chapter 3 covered paintings. The gallery smelled of fresh paint, sawdust, and reheated coffee. 3 days after the casino office, and I still had his sentence hammering in the back of my head every time I stopped moving. So I didn't stop. I'd started the day at 6, in old overalls with my hair tied up. And now, in the middle of the afternoon, I was on a ladder trying to align the track lighting the electrician had sworn was ready the night before. The back wall was the only one still giving me trouble. There was an irregularity in the plaster that caught shadow in a way that ruined any painting hung there. I'd decided that wall would hold the centerpiece of the opening, and so it had to be perfect. It was far from it. I looked at the ladder, at the wall, at the clock by the entrance, and breathed deep. You're going to fall off there, a voice said behind me. I recognized it before turning. My body recognized it before my head did. I gripped the aluminum track harder than I needed to, and came down 2 rungs slowly, with the deliberate care of someone who doesn't want it. Noticed that she's out of breath. Rocco stood 3 meters from the ladder, black coat open over the charcoal gray suit, no tie. He'd come in through the back door, the only one I left unlocked on purpose, which was why I hadn't even heard the little bell. He looked around like someone measuring a room for the first time, not like someone measuring a woman. You should warn me before showing up, I said, coming down the last rung. I told Luca. I thought he'd told you. Then next time tell me yourself. He tilted his head, a minimal movement, and something at the corner of his mouth shifted. It wasn't a smile. It was the place a smile came from when he allowed it. Agreed. I pulled the overalls off my shoulders as if it were work. It wasn't. It was to keep my hands busy. What did you come to do? I have 2 suppliers of antique frames, he answered, and the voice was the one from the casino office, calm, regulated. Italians. They work by referral only. If you accept, you save half the framing budget for the opening. I crossed my arms. I knew what was happening. It wasn't a favor. It was a man who'd learned to deliver things in place of the words he couldn't say. A man who translated attention into logistics, because it was the only language he knew how to offer without exposing himself. Why should I accept? Because it's better for the gallery. And, he looked me up and down, A quick pass I felt on my skin as if he'd run his hand over me. Then he came back to my eyes. And because I already called them both, they're expecting you tomorrow. I almost laughed. It wasn't the answer I wanted, but it was the only true answer he'd know how to give me. You're unbearable, Sorrentino. Accept or not. I accept out of stubbornness, I said, turning back to the ladder, because I needed that wall the way I needed air, just so you can see it's not a favor. I accept that it's out of stubbornness. It was there, in that dry exchange, that something shifted between us. It wasn't a declaration, it was recognition. I was accepting help from him for the first time, and he was letting me call it whatever I wanted so I wouldn't feel small in the process. He walked to the back wall without hurry. He didn't pass close to me. He always kept a calculated distance, as if he'd drawn an invisible perimeter around my body. He touched his fingers to the plaster, ran his palm slowly over the irregularity I'd spent the whole morning cursing. And this is where the centerpiece goes. How do you know? Because it's the wall that catches the first light of anyone who walks in. I shut my mouth. I hadn't expected that observation. It was the kind of thing a curator would say, not a head of family. You understand this. I learned to look at the wall before the painting. It was the first sentence of the day he hadn't said in the tone of command. It came out lower, almost a thought said aloud. I came down the ladder again, this time without the track in my hand, and went over to him. I stopped a couple of steps away. He stayed with his back to me, leaning against the wall, fingers running over the plaster as if it answered something. Why did you learn? He didn't answer right away. He looked at me over his shoulder, and for a second I saw the man before the boss. Tiredness, something carried for years. Another time. Okay, I accepted. I didn't push. It was the first time in my life I saw someone offer silence to Rocco Sorrentino and watched him accept it like a gift. And I knew, deep down, that another time with that man could be a week from now or a glass of wine from now. He took off his coat and tossed it over an empty easel. He rolled up the sleeves of the white shirt to the elbow. A short, efficient gesture. No theater. He picked the aluminum track up off the floor and went back to the ladder. Go up. I'll hold it down here. I didn't ask for help getting up. You didn't. I'm going to help anyway. I went up. Not because he told me to, because the wall still wasn't right, and because having my hands busy on top of that ladder was better than having them idle 2 steps from him. He held the base firmly, arms extended, and didn't look up once. I worked in silence for 10 minutes. The light finally hit the wall the way I wanted. Clean, no shadow, without that cursed irregularity stealing the attention. There, I said, coming down. He held out his hand to help me on the last rung. I looked at his hand and then at his eyes. I didn't take it. I came down on my own. He lowered his hand slowly. No hurry, no offense. Dinner, he said. Tonight. That wasn't a question. It was. I froze. I looked at the clock. I looked at the easel. I looked at the wall that had finally given in. Where? A restaurant my family closes at night. Just us. That's worse than a public place. It's better. No one watches. No one comments. No one calls Johnny. My brother's name entered the conversation like a stone on glass. We both went silent for 2 seconds. He waited for me to decide. 8 o'clock, I said. 7:30. Friday. I'll pick you up. Friday, 7:30. I'll meet you there. He accepted with a tilt of his head and left through the back door without saying anything else. 2 days later, on Friday night, I found the address he'd sent through Luca. The restaurant was in an alley where the neon sign was switched off on purpose. I arrived on foot, coat pulled tight against the cold that cut differently after nightfall, and the doorman opened without asking my name. Inside, only one table was set, in the back, under a low light that hid more than it lit. The chairs around it were flipped over, the other tabletops clean and empty. It was like dining inside a painting. Everything still, everything composed, everything waiting for a single gaze. Rocco was already seated. He stood when he saw me come in. Good evening. Good evening. I sat. He poured me wine without asking. It was a Barolo I'd learned to recognize by its scent, and he knew that, and we both pretended otherwise. The first half hour was careful. I talked about the frames. He talked about the suppliers. We talked about nothing that really mattered, and it was in that nothing that I started to relax, sip by sip, until I felt that table was a place where I could breathe, where no one looked at me as Johnny's sister, where I was just a woman drinking wine at a table set for 2. That was when I asked, "Why do you collect antique paintings?" He stopped with the glass halfway. He set it down slowly. He looked at the wine. He took so long to answer that I almost apologized for asking. Because of my mother. I stayed quiet. She wanted to be an artist, he went on, without looking at me. She painted at home, hidden from my father. When she died, I was 11. I found her canvases in the basement. My father had already had half of them burned. I saved what I could. Rocco, I collect because every antique canvas that comes into my home is one he didn't manage to burn. I felt the air stop in the middle of my chest. I didn't answer right away. I reached out slowly and touched my fingertips to his wrist, at the edge of the white shirt, where I knew no one touched. He looked at my hand. He didn't move. He didn't breathe in any way I could perceive as different. But he stayed, and that was everything. Thank you for telling me. I don't tell anyone. I know. I took my hand away, slowly. He kept looking at the place where my hand had been, as if the warmth were still there, and he didn't quite know what to do with it. He didn't ask me to put it back, but I saw, right there, the man behind the figure who frightened all of Philadelphia, and what I saw was an 11-year-old boy going down into a basement to save the canvases of a woman no one else would remember. We left after 11. He insisted on taking me back to the gallery so I could grab my purse, which I'd forgotten on the counter. I accepted because I wanted to drag the night out. We walked the block without saying a word. The cold bit at my exposed skin, and the air smelled of wet asphalt and smoke from a restaurant still open on the corner. I'd left my scarf in his car 2 days before. He took his own scarf off his neck and wrapped it around me without asking. His fingers touched my chin. They stopped there. I looked up. He looked down. The distance between our mouths was smaller than my breath. Allegra, Rocco. His hand moved from the collar of the scarf to the back of my neck, slowly. No hurry, no question, no permission asked and no permission given, as if he were waiting for the air between us to decide before we did. The door beside me burst open with violence. Take your hand off her. Gianni, black coat, face red from cold and from rage, standing 3 steps away. Behind him, a poorly parked car with the engine still running. Someone at the restaurant had warned him. There was always someone to warn him when it came to Viscari's sister. I froze. Rocco didn't take his hand away. He only took his eyes off me and looked at my brother slowly. Gianni, take your hand off her. Rocco took his hand away. He took a step back. He didn't lower his eyes. You owe me a conversation, Gianni said, walking toward him. For 3 days. I gave you 3 days to come to me, and you spent those 3 days having dinner with my sister in a closed restaurant belonging to your family. Gianni, stop, I said. You stay out of this, Allegra. I don't stay out of anything that's about me. He stopped. He looked at me. His eyes were wet with a rage that wasn't only rage. You're naive, he said, low. You think you know this man. You don't. I know enough. You don't know anything. I spent my whole life. My voice rose before I could control it. Being protected like protection was a pretty prison, and I'm not going to ask anyone's permission. Not his. Not yours. Not anyone's. Gianni froze. He opened his mouth, closed it. His rage was still there, but underneath it was something else. Confusion, maybe, or the recognition of a woman he hadn't expected to find where he was used to seeing only his younger sister. Rocco took a step back. Another. He looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes was the hardest thing to bear the whole night. Respect for my brother. Loyalty. The wall of the code that I knew he would never cross on his own. Good night, Allegra, he said. He left, on foot, without looking back. Gianni stood there, breathing like he'd been running. He looked at me. He opened his mouth again. Go, I said. I'll come find you tomorrow. He looked at me for another second and left. He got in the car, slammed the door, and sped off down the street. I stood on the sidewalk, his scarf still around my neck, his scent still on the back of my neck. I went into the gallery alone. The lights were off, and the silence inside was different from the silence of the street. Denser, more mine. I turned on only the one over the counter. The purse was there, where I'd forgotten it. I picked it up. I turned to leave, and that was when I saw it. His ring, matte gold, the Sorrentino crest, the broken crown, forgotten on top of the counter, beside my afternoon coffee cup. It must have slipped off his hand when he took off his coat by the easel. I knew what that ring meant. I knew no man of that family slept without it. I knew that, somewhere in this night, he was without it on his finger, and that a part of me wanted him to notice soon. I reached out slowly, and didn't touch it. I left it there. The back window looked out onto the other side of the block. When I raised my head, I saw a shadow standing on the opposite side, leaning against a lamppost. A man, dark coat, motionless. Sal Lombardi, looking straight into the gallery. Chapter 4. The Night That Almost Didn't End. I left late on purpose. The whole week I'd been leaving late on purpose. It was the Monday of the following week, 3 days after the dinner, and I hadn't seen Rocco since then. He hadn't shown up at the gallery. He hadn't sent Luca. He hadn't called. The ring was still on the counter, in the same place I'd left it. And on each of those mornings I looked at it the way you look at a sealed letter you know is going to change something the moment you open it. That night, I left closing until almost midnight. The renovation was nearly done. The walls were painted, the lighting aligned on the tracks we'd adjusted together, and the frames from the Italian suppliers had arrived in a small truck on Thursday. No invoice, no signature, just a welcome note written in handwriting that wasn't Rocco's. I'd cried sitting on the gallery floor after the delivery man left. I'd cried a little, but I'd cried, because gratitude that comes without a face is the hardest kind to refuse. I turned off the front lights. I turned off the counter light, which left a yellow circle over the ring every night like it was lighting a candle for him. I grabbed my purse. I looked at the ring. I didn't touch it. I left through the front door, locked it with the double key, and wrapped my scarf, mine, this time, not his, around my neck. The street was empty. The wind came down between the buildings with that cutting cold of a Philadelphia winter that never loses the habit of surprising you. I turned left toward the parking lot on the block above, where I left my car because the monthly rate was cheaper. Vescari. I froze. I knew the voice. It was the voice of the man who'd tried to turn me into a joke for the whole city, Sal Lombardi, coming out from behind a black pickup truck with 2 men behind him, all of them with their hands visible and the posture of people who'd rehearsed this before leaving the house. Coat open, empty hands, a smile that wasn't a smile. "Everything's going to be fine," he said, walking slowly, as if the space between us were his. "You're just going to take a little drive with us." I didn't run. I looked at the street behind him. Empty. I looked at the street behind me. Empty. I calculated the distance to the gallery door and discarded it. I calculated the distance to the intersection and discarded it. I calculated what I had in my purse and locked onto that. "What do you want?" "To talk to your brother. You're just the phone. You're stupid. And you're the currency." One of the men came around and approached from behind. I dropped the purse on purpose in the middle of the sidewalk, its contents scattered across the concrete. The cell phone bounced under the pickup. The screen lit up for a second when it hit the asphalt, enough for Luca to find the signal later. I prayed. "Grab it," Sal ordered the man behind me. He bent down. He grabbed the keys, the lipstick, the wallet. He didn't see the phone under the car. I didn't look under the car on purpose. I looked at the sky, at the wall, at any place that wouldn't draw his attention there. The phone kept ringing quietly against the cold asphalt. "Move," Sal said. They pushed me into the pickup. Middle seat. Sal up front. One man driving, the other beside me so close I could feel the unpleasant heat of his shoulder. I kept my breathing slow on purpose. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I looked out the window and counted streets. At the second intersection, I faked a cough and brought my hand to my mouth. I bit my lip hard until the taste of iron filled my tongue. Discreetly, I let my hand slip down to the edge of the seat and ran the wet finger over the black upholstery, an invisible mark for anyone not looking, a clear mark for anyone who knew what they were seeing. At the third intersection, I fiddled with my coat as if I were cold. I pulled at one of the buttons on the sleeve, one of those that had always been a little loose since last winter, and tore it off slowly. I let it drop between the seat and the door. When we stopped at the light, I pretended to look out at the street and nudged the button out with my knee. It fell into the gutter on the corner with a sound too small for anyone to hear. "Keep quiet," the man beside me ordered. "I'm quiet. Really quiet. I'm quiet." By the fifth intersection, I already knew where we were going. There was an old warehouse in the Port District my brother had mentioned once, at a family dinner where he drank too much and said more than he should. He said it was the property of a smaller family, abandoned for years. I remembered the street name. Lombardi had cousins there. The pickup entered the warehouse through the loading door. They turned off the outside lights before closing up. Inside, a single yellow bulb hung from the ceiling in the center of the space, swinging slightly, as if the air still held the memory of the wind outside, the smell of old oil and damp metal. The cold in there was even more cutting than the cold of the street. They took me out of the car. Sal walked over to me, stopped too close. His breath smelled of cheap whiskey and nerves. "Call your brother." I called him just now. "You've got my phone on a street back there. There's another phone here. Call." He held out a disposable handset. I took it. I looked at the keypad. I looked at him. I don't know his number by heart. Lie. It's not a lie. I never dialed it. It was always through the contact. It was a lie. I'd known Gianni's number by heart since I was 12, but I needed time, and time was the only product I knew how to manufacture out of nothing, so I was going to manufacture as much as possible. Sal hit me. It wasn't hard. It was open-handed, across the side of my face, more humiliation than pain, but the taste of iron came back in my mouth, and I kept it in my mouth on purpose. I spat to the side, on the concrete floor. A mark. Call whatever number you remember. I dialed a number that was almost Gianni's, but with 2 digits switched on purpose at the end. It rang. It rang again. The voicemail of some random woman. Voicemail. Again. I dialed again. I got 2 different digits wrong. It rang. Voicemail. Sal yanked the phone out of my hand. He dialed himself, brow furrowed like a man who'd finally realized he didn't know the number by heart either. I didn't even have to ask. I'll call the base, he said to the man beside me. They've got the number. He stepped off to another corner of the warehouse, his voice dropping into a conversation I couldn't quite hear. The man beside me loosened up a little, his shoulders dropping a degree. His eyes were on the boss, not on me. I looked at the floor carefully, slowly, without moving my head more than I had to. A piece of broken bottle, beside the oil drum. Small. Enough. The warehouse door blew open 3 minutes later. Enough time, I calculated afterward, for Rocco to leave the gallery, get the signal from my phone under the pickup through Luca, and cross 4 blocks of the port district in the car he was driving himself. It wasn't an explosion. It was engineering. Someone opened the loading door from the outside with a key that must have been a copy, or was the original. The yellow bulb stayed lit, but behind it came headlights cutting across the whole space like a declaration. Cars. Several. Sal drew his gun. The man beside me drew his. I already had the shard in my closed fist, hidden in my coat sleeve. From the second the man looked away, I calculated the second. I saw the thug's eye dart to the door. It was all I needed. It was in that instant that the door blew open. Rocco came in first. Long black coat, unhurried step, gun in his right hand, and his eye going from Sal to me in less than a second. A complete assessment he made without blinking. Behind him, Luca. Behind Luca, 3 more men I didn't recognize, but who covered the exits in choreographed silence, as if they'd done this together hundreds of times. Sal, Rocco said, low voice. The same voice from the casino office. Drop it. You won't shoot me in the head with her here. I'm not going to shoot you in the head. So, I'll do your legs. Both of them. Then we'll talk. Sal hesitated. It was all I needed. I spun and drove the shard into Sal's forearm, with the strength fear gave me. I didn't go for the neck. I went for the gun arm, exactly where I'd calculated. He let out a sound that wasn't human, and the gun dropped. The thug beside me lunged at me and was too late. Rocco's gun spat once, and the man collapsed sideways, clutching his shoulder. Sal still tried to grab the gun off the floor with his good hand. Rocco's gun spat again. Sal's right leg buckled. It spat 1 more time. The left. Sal fell to his knees first, then sideways, screaming the kind of scream that wasn't for me. It was for himself. Luca was already on top of him, taking the gun out of his hand and binding his wrists before the second scream ended. The 3 men controlled the rest of the warehouse without needing instruction. It all happened in less than 40 seconds. I know because I counted in my head, because counting was the only thing keeping the adrenaline from turning into panic. Rocco came toward me, slowly, without a hurry that would scare. I saw his eyes up close for the first time that night, and his eyes weren't the boss's. His eyes were those of a man who'd seen the worst possible scenario and was still processing that it hadn't happened. You're in one piece, he said. It wasn't a question. It was a confirmation he needed to hear coming out of his own mouth. I am. Show me your hand. I showed him. The shard had cut my palm too, a thin transverse line I hadn't felt happen, because adrenaline is the most honest anesthetic there is. It was bleeding. Allegra? It's just a cut. He took the handkerchief from his coat pocket and wrapped it around my hand with a calm that seemed to cost something to maintain. His fingers were trembling slightly. I think he didn't notice. I noticed, and I filed it away like someone keeping evidence. How did you find me? I stopped by the gallery to get the ring. I saw the purse dropped on the sidewalk and the phone ringing under a pickup. Luca traced the signal, a button in the gutter on Vine, blood on the upholstery of the abandoned pickup at the entrance. He looked at me. The corner of his mouth shifted. You left a whole trail, Viscari. I had to leave it. I was lucky to arrive in time. It wasn't just luck. I know, he said, low, his eyes straight on mine. That's why I said in time. Johnny arrived 15 minutes later. He came running into the warehouse with his coat open and the red eyes of a man who'd gotten a call in the middle of something and left without finishing. He stopped in the middle of the space. He saw me standing, with Rocco's handkerchief wrapped around my hand and dried blood at the corner of my mouth. He saw me with the gun of the man beside me still tucked into my waistband, because Luca had asked me to hold it while he organized the rest. He stopped. He stood staring, saying nothing for too long. I'm fine, I said. I'm fine, Johnny. He came over slowly, like someone approaching something he was used to seeing one way, and that had changed shape without warning. He stopped in front of me. He examined me the way he examined risk situations, not like a brother, but with that attention of someone who needs to understand what happened before reacting. You defended yourself. I defended myself. He looked at Sal on the floor. He looked at Rocco on the other side of the warehouse, standing, in silence, with the family ring back on his finger. He looked at me, his eyes filled slowly, like water rising without making a sound. He didn't cry. It was the limit he'd managed to reach that night. I was wrong, he said. About what? About everything, Allegra, about everything. Sal was handed over. The family's legal contacts. Lawyers the Sorrentinos kept on hand precisely for this kind of night. No open war, no body, just a case, preventive detention, and the silent end of the social reputation of a family that had bet on the wrong currency. Rocco didn't want blood. He didn't tell me the reason that night, but I saw it in the way he lowered the gun when he learned I was in one piece. Sal's blood was too cheap for him to pay. I left the warehouse between Rocco and Gianni, without saying which of the two I was going with. Car, Rocco said. I'll take her to the penthouse. She's not staying alone tonight. I'll take her, Gianni began. You're going home too, Gianni. Rest. We'll talk tomorrow. Gianni looked at me. I nodded. He hugged me. It was a short, tight hug, from a man who'd almost lost his youngest sister and was still learning. That night, that she was no longer the youngest. He let go. He left without looking back. Rocco opened the car door for me. I got in. He got in on the other side. Luca drove. The interior of the car smelled of dark leather and the same cologne I'd learned to associate with the feeling of safety without asking permission for it. No one spoke for the first kilometer. The city lights slid past the window in orange and white stripes. In the second kilometer, I laid my head on his shoulder. He didn't move. He didn't hold me. He didn't say anything. He just tilted his head slightly toward mine, slowly and carefully, until his temple rested against the top of my hair. The headlights of the other cars passed by the window like flashes. I closed my eyes. Neither of us said anything the whole way. We knew. Chapter 5. What a Brother Yields. I woke up not knowing where I was. Light came through a gap between heavy curtains. Gray-blue, that color Philadelphia has before the sun truly rises. The sheet was too soft for my apartment. The smell was of waxed wood, expensive soap, someone who controlled even the temperature of their own bedroom. It took me 2 seconds to remember. The Sorrentino penthouse, the guest room, the night before. I sat up slowly. My body ached in places I didn't even know existed. The wrist where the thug squeezed, the rib where I took the other one's shoulder, the lip I'd bitten myself. I brought my hand to my face and felt the dried mark of leftover blood. Someone had tried to clean it, probably me, without the courage to call a doctor. I got up. The white robe he'd left on the chair waited as if it knew the exact moment I'd need it. I put it on, tightened the belt, and went to the door. I pressed my ear to it. Voices. Rocco's I'd recognize in the dark. Underwater, inside a running engine. The other took me a second longer to recognize. Johnny. I swallowed hard and opened the door a finger's width. The corridor was wide, with old works hanging in matte silver frames. I knew now where each of those paintings came from. I knew the name of the woman who'd dreamed of painting them and died too young to try. I knew that the man sleeping 2 doors down had been 11 years old when he dragged those canvases out of a basement, before his father set them on fire. I closed the door again. I leaned my forehead against it. I breathed. You should have come to me first, Gianni was saying, low, from the other side of the penthouse. The office was at the end of the corridor, the door ajar. The voices came through a sliver of yellow light. Before everything, before the ring, before the gallery, before she spent a night here, you should have come to me and said it. I know. You know. A short laugh from my brother, with no humor in it. You know, and you did it anyway. Silence on Rocco's side. A silence I'd already learned to read. It was the silence of someone choosing words the way you choose knives off a tray. I crept closer, without a sound, against the wall, until I was a few steps from the ajar door. I knew it was wrong. I knew adults don't listen behind doors. But in that penthouse, that morning, I was both at once. The woman who'd stabbed a man with a shard of glass, and the youngest sister who still wanted to know if she could come into the room. "I love her," Rocco said. It was that simple. No embellishment, no raised voice, none of the boss's posture. 3 words he set down like setting a weight on a table to see if the surface would hold. I heard Gianni inhale deeply. "You love her." "I do." "How long?" A long pause. Long enough that I tried to stop, and couldn't. I pressed my hand to my mouth. I felt, beneath my fingers, that my mouth had trembled. I braced my other hand against the wall, the balcony, that night, the glass, the drink in his hand, the smile he gave me when I turned my head and discovered he'd heard. Since then, whole months in which he'd looked at me at dinners and casual gatherings without ever saying, "You never touched her," Johnny said, and I knew it was a question. Tell me looking at me, I never touched her. I'll never touch her without her choosing it. And if she chooses it, then it's between the 2 of us. Silence again. I pictured my brother standing in the office, hands on his hips, that way he had of thinking on his feet, as if sitting were losing a round. I pictured Rocco behind the desk, ring back on his finger, looking straight at him without looking away once. "Did you hear what she said yesterday?" Gianni asked. His voice came out lower, more broken than he would have liked. "At the warehouse. After Sal was taken away. Did you hear what she said to me?" "I did." "Repeat it." "I'm not going to repeat it, Johnny. It was for you. Repeat it." A sigh from Rocco, restrained. "And she said, the night you showed up in front of the gallery, that she spent her whole life being protected like protection was a pretty prison, that she wasn't going to ask permission anymore. Not from you, not from me, not from anyone." I heard it, and I kept it. I swallowed the knot that rose in my throat. I'd said that at the gallery, days before, shouting. Rocco had kept the sentence in his chest until this morning to give it back to the only man who needed to hear it. I felt a wave of gratitude so idiotic I had to bite my lip again, on the other side of the wound. I heard a chair being dragged. Gianni sat down. It was the first time in that conversation. "I'm 32 years old," my brother said, after a long while. 32. "I've taken care of her since she was 7. Our mother died. Our father became a ghost. And I stayed. I didn't know how to take care of a girl. Rocco. I knew how to take care of a soldier. So I took care of her the way you'd take care of a soldier. Kept her away from the streets, away from men, away from anything that could become a danger. And not once did I ask if that was what she wanted. I know. You know because she's the same. You don't ask. I don't ask. We both have that flaw. And she just shouted it in both our faces at the same time. I know. Stop saying I know. All right. Johnny laughed. It was a strange laugh, broken, but it was a laugh. "I'm going to need time," my brother said, low, "more than I'd like. I look at you, and I still see the 15-year-old kid who broke down the door of a bar in Trenton with me, because we thought we were men. I don't know how to put you next to Allegra in my head. I don't know yet. That's all right. But I won't stand between you 2. Johnny's voice grew a fraction, like someone forcing himself to speak louder so he wouldn't flee. "You hear me? I won't. If she chooses you, I'll swallow it. If she chooses you and you do her a millimeter of harm, I'll bury you. And that's not a figure of speech." "It's not," Rocco answered without hesitating. "I know it's not. I'd hand you the shovel myself." I leaned my forehead against the wall again. I closed my eyes. Inside those 2 men, on the other side of that ajar door, something was being unmade and remade at the same time, like a seam coming open that has to be pulled again, stitch by stitch, with a new needle. I went back to the room without making a sound. I sat on the edge of the bed. I reached out and grabbed the glass of water from the nightstand. The water trembled a little, but not much. I drank slowly. When I knocked on the office door, an hour later, dressed in a black blouse of Mira's that someone had brought me in the dead of night, the 2 of them looked up at the same time. "I heard," I said. Johnny rubbed his face. Rocco didn't look away. "I heard half the conversation. At least, I'm not going to pretend I didn't." "Allegra," Johnny began. "Wait, let me speak first." He shut his mouth. It was the first time in his life my brother shut his mouth to listen to me. "I don't hate you," I said, looking straight at him. "I never hated you. I love you too much to hate you. And that's half the problem. I let you decide everything my whole life because it was easier to let you than to fight. That's as much my fault as yours. But it's over. Johnny lowered his head. I know. There's more, I breathed. And if you want to stay close to me, you'll have to learn to be close to me without directing the traffic around me. You'll have to listen more than you talk. You'll have to ask first. Do you think you can do that? I'll try. Trying doesn't work for me. He raised his head. He looked at me like someone looking at a stranger for the first time. I'll do it, he said. It might be slow, but I will. All right. That was all. No hug, no tears, no scene. Just a sentence he'd owed me for years. I looked at Rocco. We need to talk. He nodded. Gianni rose from the chair, straightened his jacket, paused a second in the doorway. He turned his eyes back to me. Allegra, he said, I love you too. I just didn't know how yet. He left without waiting for an answer. The door closed. Rocco and I were alone in the office. The day passed strangely, in slow motion, as if every hour had twice the minutes. I didn't go back home. Mira showed up with more clothes in the late morning. I'd asked Rocco, as soon as I woke up, to have Luca let her know, and she stayed with me at the penthouse through the afternoon, pretending she was distracting me when in fact I knew she just wanted to be near. We ate soup that came from the kitchen in silence. Luca passed by the corridor twice. The second time, Mira said something ironic, and he answered without moving a muscle in his face. Mira shot me a look that said more than she'd admit. I filed it away for later. That evening, Rocco asked if I wanted to go to the gallery. He said he'd had the counter cleaned, that the ring was still there. I said I wanted to. We went in his car. No driver. He drove slowly, left hand on the wheel, right on the gear shift, without touching me once. The city lights slid past the windows, orange, that color Philadelphia has when the cold starts to break. I looked straight ahead. I felt him glancing at me at every red light. The gallery was the way I'd left it days before, paintings covered with white cloths, scaffolding still leaning against the back wall, a smell of new paint mixed with the cold seeping under the door. Rocco opened it with the key I'd forgotten with him and held the door for me to pass. I walked to the counter. The matte gold ring glinted there, low, as if it had never left its place. I reached out and picked it up. It weighed more in my palm than I remembered. He came up behind me. He didn't touch me. He stopped a step away. I could feel the heat of his body at my back, the way you feel the sun coming in through a window. Hold out your hand, I said. He held it out, the right hand, broad, calloused from a whole life. I placed the ring in his palm. I closed his fingers over the ring. I let go. This ring is yours, I said. I don't keep what's yours. I keep you, if you stay with me. He breathed deep. I looked back at him. I felt my chin lift on its own, the way it lifts when I'm about to ask for something that costs. Kiss me. Rocco didn't move. For a second, I thought I'd read it wrong. Then I understood. He was waiting to be sure. You decided, he said. Low, more a statement than a question. I decided. He tucked the ring into the inner pocket of his coat. Slowly, he brought his free hand to my chin. He touched his fingers to the corner of my mouth, to the dried wound on my lip. It didn't hurt. The tenderness hurt. That did. And he kissed me. It wasn't quick. It wasn't hungry. It was the kiss of a man who'd been waiting months to be given permission. His mouth found mine like someone coming home after a journey that was too long. I felt his warmth, the taste of the black coffee he'd had earlier, the short beard scraping my skin. I felt his hand move up to the back of my neck and stop there, holding, as if he were afraid I'd vanish. I put both hands on his chest. I felt the heart beating beneath the expensive fabric of the coat, faster than he let show. I smiled into the kiss. He noticed. He smiled too, without pulling his mouth away. When he finally pulled back, it was only enough to rest his forehead against mine, the two of us looking down, breathing the same air. The paintings around us covered, white as peaceful ghosts. The gallery light yellow, low, exactly the kind of light you turn on when you don't want the night to end. When you decide, Allegra, he said, his voice rough, against my lips. It'll be you who decides. Everything. I closed my eyes. I felt, in my chest, something open. It wasn't happiness yet. Happiness came later. It was the exact feeling of someone who spends a whole life holding a closed door shut and finally lets go of the handle. All right, I whispered. He kissed my forehead, then the corner of my mouth, avoiding the wound. Then he stood there, holding my face between his two hands, as if he were memorizing it. And I, for the first time in my life, let someone memorize me without hiding anything. Chapter 6, When I Decide. Thursday afternoon, and the gallery looked like itself for the first time. The white cloths came off that morning. The paintings were on the walls, aligned, lit by warm light I'd fought to get. It smelled of new paint and varnish and floor wax. A combination of smells I didn't know went together until that day. I walked the room barefoot, sandals in hand, checking that each frame was level. They all were. Mira had texted me in the morning saying that if I touched one more thing, she was going to tie me to a chair. I didn't touch anything, but I spent time thinking about touching it. The front door opened, and the bell rang. I raised my head. Rocco came in, black coat over the dark suit, high collar turned up, matte gold ring back on his finger. He looked around, slowly, like someone entering a small and respectful museum. He stopped in the middle of the room. He made a slow turn on himself, registering each wall, each painting, each point of light. He stayed silent longer than I expected. "It's ready," he said, at last. "It's almost." "No, it's ready." I smiled. I put my sandals on. I went over to him. "The opening still has no date," I said. "Mira said if I don't breathe between one decision and another, she'll gag me." She would. She really would. He held out his hand. I took it. His fingers closed over mine in that firm way he had, holding without squeezing. His skin was warm. Mine went cold at the tips, always. A winter inheritance since I was a girl, since before I knew what real winter was. "Come," he said. "I have something." I closed the gallery up. I got in the car with him. He drove without saying where, and I didn't ask. It was the first time in my life I'd gotten into a car without asking the destination. I looked out the windows at Philadelphia passing by outside, gray and white and laden with cold, and I felt no urgency to know where I was going. The penthouse was silent when we arrived. No soldier on duty in the corridor, no Luca in the corner, no telephone ringing, just him and me, and a low light coming from the end of the corridor. The room was in order. On the corner table, a bottle of wine opened not long ago, 2 washed glasses, a cheese plate he hadn't had time to arrange without realizing it was ridiculous for a Mafia boss to be checking the order of each slice. I looked at the plate, and then at him. The corner of my mouth lifted on its own. "You checked whether it looked good." I had them arrange it. A minimal pause, of someone weighing whether it's worth admitting the rest. I checked. I didn't joke anymore. There was something in the sight of him trying this for me that hurt in a good place. He smiled. It was a smile I was still learning to collect. A small smile, at the corner of his mouth, that he only gave near me, like a concession he didn't even realize he was making. We sat on the sofa. He poured the wine. We talked about small things. The gallery, Mira's new restaurant, Luca's stern face in the corridor earlier. I started to loosen up inside the coat he'd put over my shoulders without asking, as if belonging in that room were the most natural thing in the world. I drank slowly. He drank less than I did. At some point, I no longer knew what time it was. I only knew that the light outside had turned dark blue, and that my hand was on his thigh without either of us having decided it in words. "Rocco," I said. He turned his head. "I've decided." He didn't answer immediately. He set the glass down carefully, without a sound. He brought his hand to my face. His fingers passed over my chin, moved up my cheek, stopped at the back of my neck, beneath my hair. I closed my eyes. "Look at me," he said. I opened them. "Are you sure?" "I am. It's not the wine. It's not the wine. It's not gratitude for the warehouse. It's not." "Then what is it?" I thought. I thought longer than he expected. I took 2 whole seconds before answering, because the answer deserved those 2 seconds. "It's a choice," I said. "It's the first one I'm making without anyone telling me yes or no first. It's today." He rested his forehead against mine. I felt his breath beat against my lip. I felt his scent up close, that scent of cedar and old tobacco and something clean underneath it all. I felt his thumb slowly tracing the line of the back of my neck, like a promise written in silence, letter by letter, and then he kissed me, slowly. The same kiss from the gallery, but deeper, more patient, fuller than what had come before and what was still to come. I let my hand move up his chest. I felt the ring touch my face when he held my chin again, and I didn't pull away. When he stood and held out his hand to me, I took it without hesitating. He led me to the bedroom. The door closed. Morning came slowly. I woke first. Low winter sun coming through the high window, that washed color Philadelphia has in February when the cold gives a few hours. Truce. The sheets lay warm and heavy. The room had that dense silence that only exists early, when the world hasn't started yet. I was turned on my side, looking at him. Rocco slept. It was the first time I'd seen him sleep. No mask, no jaw angle he kept up when awake, no tension in his eyelids, no care in his shoulders. The dark hair fell over his forehead, longer than it looked when he combed it, the mouth relaxed, the breathing slow and even, his chest rising and falling beneath the sheet, with a thin scar cutting across the right shoulder that I'd discovered the night before and still hadn't asked where it came from. I left the question for another day. I lay there without moving, memorizing, the way he'd memorized me at the gallery, returning the favor in silence. His eyes opened. It wasn't a start. It was gradual, like someone waking up at home. He found my face. He smiled, in that small way, at the corner of his mouth. Good morning. Mine. I closed my eyes a second. I breathed deep. I opened them. Good morning. He pulled my hand under the sheet and held it against his chest. I felt his heart beating, calm, steady, unhurried, beneath my palm. We stayed like that for a time I couldn't measure. At some point, he got up and went to the kitchen to get coffee. He came back in pajama pants, barefoot, stepping lightly on the cold wood floor, with 2 cups. I sat against the headboard, held mine. The coffee was strong and bitter. He'd remembered I didn't take it with sugar, without my having had to say. We talked about nothing. About the gallery's light, about the small cocktail party Mira wanted to push, about the message Johnny had sent earlier. Short, polite, with a sentence at the end that caught crosswise in my throat for no reason. Take care of her. Rocco read it aloud. I laughed. I felt, just behind the laugh, a small stumble. It was quick. It lasted as long as a breath. I thought, without wanting to think it, that Gianni had been strange in the last few conversations. Not in that old way of resentment, which he'd already let go. Something else. A weight in his voice he hadn't named. A sentence he swallowed, at the penthouse, when he thought no one was listening. Something he was carrying without sharing it. The thought lasted as long as a breath. I looked at Rocco. Pajamas, coffee, messy hair, matte gold ring glinting on the nightstand where he'd taken it off the night before, and I pushed it away. It was morning. It was our first morning. It was peace. I wasn't going to bring a shadow into it. Rocco noticed something on my face. He tilted his head slightly, that gesture of his, of someone who reads what wasn't said. Where did you go? Nowhere, I said, and it was almost true. I was right here. He looked at me a second longer than he needed to. Then he nodded, without insisting. He learned fast, this man, about when to ask and when to wait. I set the cup on the nightstand. I rested my head on his shoulder. I felt the ring cold against my cheek when he brought his hand to my hair and stayed there, without movement, just present. Outside, the February morning went on. The gallery was waiting for me a few weeks from now. Mira was waiting for me with a guest list still to be confirmed. Johnny was waiting for me with a postponed conversation I was going to have one of these days. Life went on with its weight, and its fights, and its decisions small and large. But in that second, in that bed, that morning, I closed my eyes and smiled. I was at peace, and it was the first time. Lena here. That wraps up book 1, and I've already finished book 2. You can get access to it for a really small fee. I thought Rocco could protect me from everything, until the day a blood debt fell into his hands like a death sentence. The law of the Mafia didn't forgive. All the capos expected him to carry out the punishment with his own hands, to drive in the knife, to wipe out the traitor without hesitating. I saw the cold gleam in his eyes when he received the order. I felt the tremble in my legs as I begged, on my knees, for him not to become the monster I feared most. He stopped in the doorway, gun at his waist, and looked at me as if I were already a ghost. It's the price of my name, Allegra. One word from me, and he could lose everything. One choice of his, and I could lose him forever. But what I carried inside my body, the secret growing in silence, would change everything. If he found out now, in the middle of blood and blind loyalty, what if he chose the Mafia? What if the man I loved became the executioner I swore to hate, and I lived a whole life imprisoned? What if, when he finally learned the truth, my womb were already empty of hope? How could I save him? If perhaps he had already destroyed me? Like I said, that was just a taste of book 2. To watch it uncensored, just click on the first link here in the pinned comment. I'll see you on the other side in a few seconds. Remember, just click on the first link down here in the comments, and book 2 complete. no ads, no interruptions, will already be available for you. It's very simple. Book 2 is something I'm loving making. You're loving it too, so I promise there will be more. It's where you find increasingly spicy stories, a true dark romance. And precisely because this version is getting more and more heated, the video isn't well accepted publicly on YouTube. This closed environment is where I can actually share my essence and where I feel free to do my best work for you. More news coming soon. I'll be waiting for you on the other side. Unfortunately, many people have been downloading our audio, effectively copying the entire story, and simply reposting it on YouTube. If you want to watch the original story and be the first to receive the next ones, search for My Stories by Lena on YouTube to get the best dark romance content. Remember, the official channel is My Stories by Lena on YouTube. I'll be waiting for you there. Congratulations! Your purchase has been confirmed, and you now have full access to books 1 and 2 of all our stories, completely ad-free and uninterrupted. Everything is available on the My Stories platform, from Mafia romance and billionaire romance to our spicier tales. This content is ready for you now, with new episodes added daily. Access is simple. Just log in using the same email address you used for your purchase. A confirmation has also been sent to that same email. The My Stories platform is very simple and intuitive. Each image represents a story. If it has a book 2, just click and press play. Everything is already unlocked for you. You can also rate each story, leave a like, and write a comment. Your feedback will be visible to all our other subscribers. This is our romance universe, so please feel free to interact. From this moment on, this is officially your home for romance stories. Just head over to mystoriesromance.com and press play. Welcome to the family.